Hey, look out. It's Faith Talk Live. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
You're watching YouTube Live or Facebook Live. There on the screen is Yvette Hampton. She's going to talk about Schoolhouse Rock, the documentary. She has podcasts. She does it all. Yvette, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me today.
Great to have you on. And we were talking just before we went on that you are in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right smack in the middle of the country. You went from California to Georgia and thought, let's just go split the difference, right?
Right. Yep. And it's kind of funny because everything really it's a perfect combination of a little bit of California, a little bit of Georgia. People here think it's humid, and I'm like, oh no.
Oh no.
Go to Savannah, Georgia, and you'll get humid.
You don't know humid until
you don't know humid. We just humor them and smile and say, yes, it's humid here.
Okay, so help me here because I've only visited, I'm just passing through Oklahoma, Tulsa, Broken Arrow. Is it a dry heat there, as they say, like in Phoenix? So it bakes you from the inside out. What's it like there?
No, it literally is the perfect combination. We are from actually the Mojave Desert in California, Los Angeles County, but we're like the northernmost part of Los Angeles County. And so I come from very dry heat from the desert. And here it's not a dry heat, but it's not a very wet heat. And you know how you can tell is after you take a shower, if your towel dries, it's not very humid. But your skin is not completely dry. So it's a little humid. It's a little dry.
Yeah.
That's the litmus test there, right there.
Test.
Yvette Hampton, she was opposed to homeschooling for years, and something changed that. We're going to talk about that. There's a documentary. I think it's cool that even in the story, that you spent 3 years in a motorhome interviewing families about homeschooling. I think that, to me, that sounds awesome. Yeah. At what point did you go, we got to find a home?
Well, I would say probably at about the 1 week mark, we thought that. Yes, it was quite an adventure. It's funny because I didn't grow up camping or, I didn't grow up as an outdoors person at all. My husband did, but it was all new to me. And so, living in an RV, we went from living in our 5-bedroom house in LA County to this 260 square foot travel trailer.
Ooh,
and it was a drastic transition for our family. But you know what? We realized that we didn't need all of the stuff that we had in our big house. And so we haven't become complete minimalists, but we definitely realized we can live with a lot less than what we think we need to make us happy. And so we loved it. It was a great adventure. And but I would say, after a year, we thought, we would do it for about a year, and then a year turned into much longer. And after about the year mark, we were like, okay, we're ready to be back in the house again.
Now, was that his idea to do that, or was that your idea to do that?
It's really amazing. This is how the Lord works. We were sitting in church one day. It was I think it was April of 2016. And in the middle of church, I actually wrote on our church bulletin, and I wrote a note to my husband. We don't usually pass notes in church, but this day, for some reason, I thought it was a good idea. And I said, I think we should get a motorhome, travel the country, and go find home, because we knew we were ready to leave California. And this was 5 years ago, little over 5 years ago. And I passed that over to him in church, and he just looked at me like, are you crazy? We can't do that. And we had talked about, getting a motorhome, but never living in one full time and leaving California to do that. So fast forward several months later, and the Lord actually had put it on his heart to do that as well, and to film this documentary on homeschooling. And what was neat about that was, I think, had I come up with the idea, because I came up with the idea first, though it wasn't really my idea, I was very willing to say yes. And had he come up with the idea first, I would have been much more resistant to the idea of leaving home.
Interesting.
We're talking to Yvette Hampton. Schoolhouse Rock is the documentary, and she just threw us a softball there because the filming went on through that, 3 years where you talked to families. In the documentary, we want people to see that, but in the beginning, do you share the fact that you really didn't want to get into homeschooling in the beginning? How does this all start?
Yes, we do share that fact. Both my husband and I said we'd never homeschool. We'd been married for almost 11 years before our oldest daughter was born. And so we had so much time to talk about parenting and education and how we would raise our kids. And so when it came time to put our oldest in school, she was 4. And so we bought into the idea, of course, that society tells us, they have to go to pre-K. And so she was 4 and we were planning on putting her in pre-K. And in order to do that, the public schools were not an option for us in LA County, as you could imagine. They're as bad as you would think. And so we thought, well, we'll put her in a private Christian school, which was the school I had grown up in. And it was very expensive. And so the only way we could afford to do that was for me to work part-time to help pay for the tuition. Well, I ended up pregnant with my youngest daughter at the time. And so I couldn't work. And so we were like, well, I guess we'll maybe homeschool for pre-K. I mean, how hard can that be? Letters, numbers, shapes. And so we went to a homeschool convention. We were invited by some friends and didn't really know what we were getting ourselves into by going to this convention. I literally thought we were going to go and everyone was going to be, have their hair in a bun, wearing long denim skirts. And, that just is what it was. And many
the Duggars are here.
Right. And we went and I remember walking in the first night and I was like, oh, well, these are like, they're just people, like normal people like us. And in one weekend alone, our hearts were completely transformed. It was absolutely miraculous. And we came home from that convention after it. It was like the scales fell from our eyes and we were like, wow, so this is really what homeschooling is. And we came home from that and we just said, this is not something we're going to try just for a week or a year. This is what we're going to do with our kids for their whole education, through their childhood. And so that's what we did. And it was an absolute, incredible transformation for both my husband and I. And so we jumped in with both feet and I'm the first to admit we jumped into it, with knees knocking and sweat on our brow. We were terrified because especially me, I was going to be the one to take the reins with it. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I knew that it was what was right for our family and for our girls. And so we jumped in and, 6 years later started production on this documentary.
So how did the idea for the movie come about? And did you go in with preconceived notions? What were you hoping to accomplish with the movie?
The movie really was Garrett's idea, my husband. He had been teaching film. He worked in the Hollywood film industry for many years. And then he went on to teach film at a private school. And that year he was teaching was the year that we just said, we're ready to go. We're ready to leave California. And he didn't know what he wanted to do for work. He had so many options. He's prior military, he has his marketing degree, he has his film background. He didn't really know what he wanted to do, and people were throwing jobs at him, and he just nothing settled right with him. And so one day he said to me, I don't know how to tell you this, and this goes back to the story of getting the RV. He said, I don't know how to tell you this, but I don't think that I should look for a job. He said, I think that we should sell the house, sell everything in it, and I think we should travel to film a documentary. And so it was really on his heart to film it. And the reason for that was because we had seen that people, including ourselves, had so many misconceptions. That's why we said we'd never homeschool, because we really did not understand it. And we bought into all the negative stereotypes. And so we wanted to share with the world. We had started seeing on Facebook all of these, messages just pouring in of moms who were desperate. They were desperate for answers. They were discouraged. They didn't know what to do with their kids. They didn't understand homeschooling, and they just needed encouragement. They needed to be validated in their decision. They needed help and hope. And then there were other parents who were like, we don't know what to do with our kids. We're not comfortable with the public school system. And this was 6 years ago. Things have drastically changed even in the last 6 years. But you could already see the writing on the walls. And so parents were wanting to get into homeschooling, but they didn't really know what to do or how to get started. And so we just, he just said, I think we should make a documentary about our journey, but talk to experts and other homeschool families that really tell the story of homeschoolers and bring the hope to these families that they're so desperately seeking. And so that's kind of how the movie started. And the doors just opened from there.
Yvette Hampton is talking about the Schoolhouse Rocked documentary. Check it out. We want to know where folks can find it, and where do you take them after the documentary? Do you have? Can they connect with you? We want them, of course, to listen to the podcast. That's something that you do. You do both audio and video podcasts?
We do, yes. Yes. So they can go to schoolhouserocked.com. It's ROCKED, schoolhouserocked.com. That's where they can find the movie. It opens this Friday, and people will be able to stream it into their homes. They can also do a group showing if they would like, but that's the best place to find the film. And also the podcast. They can find the podcast on the website as well. So we produce a weekly podcast. It's actually a three-part podcast, three-part episode each week with the same guest, because homeschool moms don't have a lot of time to listen to an hour-long podcast. So we split it up into 3 20-minute parts. And that the podcast is really kind of the action to the movie. We talk about everything relating to home education and family discipleship, whether it's marriage, parenting, home organization, homeschooling, of course, and everything related to that. And so we offer that hope to our listeners week after week. We have a new guest on each week. And so right now we're actually doing a Meet the Cast lineup. So for the past several months, we've had most of our cast members on the podcast who talk about, their passion for homeschooling and their family and their testimonies and things like that. So it's really fun. And then at the end of the movie, you'll see the call to action. It says to go to schoolhouserock.com to download your free homeschool survival kit. And that we will have that will be available on Friday with the movie. People can download that survival kit, and it will walk them through every detail they need to start homeschooling with excellence.
Wow. How many times a week, Yvette, do you hear somebody say, boy, I thought you homeschoolers were a bunch of, weirdos, but this is actually a good thing. I like this. Kind of like how your eyes were opened.
Yeah, not so much anymore, especially since COVID, because so many people brought their kids home and got to see for the first time that they could do this.
Yeah.
And the socialization, argument that people used to make years ago, we never even hear that anymore. Surprisingly, I know that people still have that reservation, but truly there are so many opportunities for homeschool families today that there's no reason for kids to be weird or awkward or unsocialized. And to be quite honest, like, my friend Heidi says, your kids are going to be as weird as you are. And so, whether they're in public school, private school, homeschool, kids are kids. There's weird kids everywhere.
Yeah.
And so, it's not, we don't hear the arguments as much anymore. Now, the reason that most people don't homeschool is because moms don't feel like they're adequate or equipped enough to do this. And that's where the movie comes in, is we come alongside these moms and just say, you are everything your kid needs. God gave them to you. He's going to equip you with everything you need to accomplish what he's called you to. And you are enough for your kids. And you just stay one step ahead of them. You learn alongside of them. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to be the expert at every subject, because you know what? You're the expert at your kids.
Yeah.
And no one else is. No one else loves them like you do. And no one else knows them like you do.
Good stuff.
Nice quote from Heidi there.
Yeah.
Your kids are as weird as you are. Makes a great tattoo or a t-shirt.
In that case, there's no hope for our kids, Rick.
Yeah, they're done. Yvette Hampton at Schoolhouse Rocked. And may I say how clever Schoolhouse Rocked. Check it out, schoolhouserocked.com. Yvette, we would love to talk to you after the first of the year, kind of catch up with you and see what's going on in 2022. You've been a great guest, and we love what you're doing. We got to take a break. We'll be right back. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
This is Faith Talk Live.